Everyone. Thank you for participating in our conversation about barrier reactivity. So when we were talking about barrier reactivity this week, we were specifically talking about windows, gates, fence lines, crates. So if you go to crate your dog, if they're reacting through the crate door. And there is a lot of discussion about creating extra space. So if you have a dog that's barrier reactive in your own house, so there's one that's reactive and you have other dogs. The one that's reactive might need extra space in the house. So one of our contributors, who's a trainer, brought up an airlock protocol. So what that is we always have one door closed at least, just like if you were going into an airlock containment. So we'd have two doors or barriers between the dogs. And when you enter one, you close the one door before you go through the second one as a safety feature. So that's really important if your dog isn't only barrier reactive, but also dog aggressive. So that's something that'll come up more if we talk about aggression, when we talk about aggression, because we will. But when we're dealing with barrier reactivity, a lot of times when I've seen it, the dogs aren't actually aggressive. They are frustrated by the barrier. So we can have a dog that's totally friendly, totally dog social, great with people, and we close that crate door and they look like a vampire, like full teeth, barking, lunging. And we open the door and they're all loose and happy and like ready to socialize. That is barrier reactivity without any aggression. But it's still frustrating because if you go to a dog show or you go to a dog training class and you need to contain your dog and your dog has that concern, it can create a problem, and we don't want it to turn into something bigger either. So when we're dealing with crating in particular, the kindest thing we can do for our dogs is to add more of a visual blockade. So what that would be in my ideal world is a separate room. One of the reasons when I go to trials, I have a van that my dogs can stay in almost any temperature, almost any, if it's super, super hot, no, is because I know that they're really secured. They can't see anybody else's dogs. They have their crate, and then they have this whole vehicle, which takes everything down a notch when you have breeds that tend to be naturally reactive. And Aussies fall into that category for sure, but lots of breeds do, right? So having that extra space, I find is crucial to trialing success for my dogs. Not all of them, but most of them. They can crate in a bigger area. I can tarp them or I can blanket them or whatnot, but if I'm looking for optimal relaxation out of a dog that's barrier reactive, separate space. So if I have a dog in my home that has barrier reactivity to the other dogs in my home, then they're gonna get their own bedroom. And I know that's not feasible for everybody, depending on how much space you have. But if you can pull that off, if you can put that crate in just a separate room, so when that dog's in the crate, there is no chance of them seeing another dog, you're going to see that dog relax more, and you may see a decrease in that behavior because they're not practicing it all the time. So that's where kind of having a management setup will help you with your training plan, right? The other thing we need to do when we're working on barrier reactivity with crates and X-pens and such is we want to reinforce the dog for calm behavior, and we want to teach them how to be calm in those spaces with no stimulus. That means no other dogs or no other triggers to react to. So doing a relaxation protocol with the dog in the crate or the X-pen, get them used to being relaxed in there. And not necessarily with a high-value resource, because a lot of times when I'm crate training or I'm teaching a relaxation to a dog, I will give them a bone or a Kong or something. But if your dog is a bit of a resource guarder and they're barrier reactive, that might be too much. So just, dropping a couple kibbles at a time, hanging out with them, play some soothing music, talk to the dog, and just keep everything low-key so that they learn that that's a safe place they can relax in and nothing's going to happen to them. They don't need to protect it. And it, depending on the severity of your dog, might be really, really slow baby steps. So when you're dealing with this, I would think first of how do I make this dog comfortable as possible while I work through these issues. Now, if I'm going to a class with my dog and I'm working through the issues in other places, I would bring a sheet, something really lightweight, breathable, but ideally dark so they can't see through it. And I would also give the dog something to do in the crate and try to set up as much space between yourself and other dogs. I'd also pick a quieter spot to put your dog rather than somewhere where they're going to walk back and forth past you as much as possible. Like, you're always working within the spaces that you have to deal with. And then again, I would encourage you, if possible, to crate out of your car if it's safe, because that pulls the dog out of the environment. They can learn to relax in their crate in between their work and have that downtime, and that's pretty crucial. So that's kind of crating with barrier reactive dogs in the house in a class situation. Let's talk about windows. Windows can be tough. I've lived in some houses that are on main streets with big windows. And when you first go to view the house, you're like, this is beautiful, it's nice, look at all the natural light. And then you move in and you're like, oh my God, what did I do? Because my dogs are barking at every person or every noise and everything that could possibly move out there. So we saw some options again in the discussion group where people have actually used baby gates to block their dog off from those rooms. I would definitely choose that option when I'm not home. Possibly when I am home, if I can't actually work the dog too. Interrupting that rehearsal of reactivity is pretty important. So it's a good we're in training strategy, as well as something I would continually use when I'm not home, unless I'm crating my dog or some other containment option. When I am home and I'm working through it, the first thing I would do for a new dog is I would buy some of that window film, block off the window so it's less easy to see from. I love blinds that come up from the floor and go up, because you can block the action, but you can still get some light in, which is nice if you like plants, which I do. So those are good tools to use. I would use the window film for a little while, maybe not forever. Again, really depends on the dog and the other issues I've got going on. But what I've done with my dogs consistently through all the different houses I've had to live in is teach them when they see a stimulus outside, it actually triggers a behavior from them that I want, which is to come and lie on their dog bed. Which sounds perfect and easy and lovely, but it's not an easy thing to train. You start with your go to bed. Then you start with a go to bed with distraction out there. So whenever they see something, they start to bark, ask them to go to bed, and reinforcing that behavior over and over again. I'm also teaching a settle on the bed. And then after a while, what I tend to get is 1 or 2 barks. They'll look at me. I can give them a verbal, go to bed. They're going to go to bed. And that's it. Say good dog and we're done. I don't even always have to feed that. So now what I find happens for my keen dogs, they'll see the stimulus and they'll just run to bed, and we've skipped the barking a lot of the time. If there's a dog on the street that's reactive, it's outside barking, that's trickier for my dogs. I find I have to go back to the earlier steps where I go and interrupt the behavior to have them come and do the settle behavior. So that kind of covers windows in a way. We're going to block the dog's access when we're not there. When we are there, we're going to train something else. In my case, it's the go to bed. Some people will train pick up a toy. Depending on your breed, that can work awesome, because most dogs won't bark with something in their mouth, although I've seen enough that can. Just figure something that's incompatible with the behavior you don't want and teach that, reinforce that, make that a big deal, and try and get those dogs from rehearsing that behavior, especially if your dogs are at risk of redirecting. So talk about redirecting with fence lines too, but basically what redirecting is we have dogs, more than one, but usually, a few there. They're all reacting, or one of them's reacting, the other one's just looking. The reacting dog turns around and bites or contact with the other dog. Typically, I don't see major injuries from dogs in this kind of scenario, but it can happen for sure, especially if you have big size differences. The dog that's redirecting is not thinking. It's not usually intentional, and we can get punctures for sure because they're just so mad. They're just lashing out. So it's not a thoughtful intent. We can see it from dogs who are not dog aggressive. We can see it from dogs who love the other dogs they live with. We can see it happen also dog to human. So say we have a dog reacting at the window, I get too close, it decides it's going to bite me instead. I shouldn't use the word decide. It's not usually a decision, it's a frustration response. They're not thinking it through. So when we have a dog that is that level of frustrated with a fence or a window, I would seriously be training really hard to go to place. And I would probably have that dog tethered to me or on a long line so I could bring them in pretty quickly if I needed to. Again, this depends on the dog and the situation, but you don't want your other dogs being hurt. So setting up a really strong management plan where the dog isn't practicing the behavior at all while you're training would be ideal. If they are able to rehearse the behavior while you're working through it, you need a way to quickly interrupt and break up the scenario so no one gets hurt. So that's something to be aware of. I've had dogs that have done this redirection aggression. The dog that was guilty party of this, he would do it in any situation. So behind a fence, behind a window, so in a car. He couldn't be loose in the car with other dogs at all. He would just get amped, and then he would jump on the other dog. More often than not, he wasn't injuring them. It was just like a lot of noise, but it's scary for the other dog that was the victim of this, and it's also not a behavior that you want your dog practicing, because it continues to grow and get worse most of the time. So having that interruption would be crucial. And again, like if your dogs are in a car and they're reactive, the key there is to eliminate that visual, especially if you're leaving your dogs in your car when you're not there. But even if you're driving, there's not a lot you can do. So crates in cars, I have purchased pretty as this priority for me would be having a vehicle where my dogs can be crated safely and can't necessarily see out the windows. So I've gone pretty hard that way, even though I don't need to with my current dogs. I've had that issue in the past, and I don't want it ever again, so I don't want to be in a setup where my dogs are learning to do that. So when you're purchasing your vehicles and you're living dog life, like multi-dog life, you need to think about these things. I've got, maybe I have 2 or 3 big dogs. How am I going to contain these dogs in my car if I have a small car? So, we get a lot of reluctant members of the minivan club that way. I have a cargo van at this point. And having a way to safely contain the dogs and block those windows. So if you're crating in your car and you're not there and you don't have a crate, you can still block your windows. You can hang up sheets. You can put towels up. They have those baby sunshades. Some dogs, that's enough. You work with what you've got. You do the best you can. There's solutions for all budgets, but make sure you're not just letting it happen over and over again. So now we're going to talk about fences, because I see this one a lot, especially in multi-dog homes. The dogs kind of egg each other on. I live on a street where we have a high school that gets out. So twice a day, every day, I have a ton of traffic. I have people traffic. I have kids that are loud. I have people with their dogs there. I have people that hang out on my lawn with their dogs. So when I first moved here, it was a big project for me. And what I have done, if my dogs happen to be outside when these activities are going on, which they might be, they just recall inside, and then I ask for a settle. Now, that sounds easy. I know a lot of you guys probably don't have a recall where you can call away from dog reacting at a fence. I get calls from clients all the time to work on that behavior. It's not easy. Typically, you're going to work your recall with no stimulus. You're going to work your recall using a long line just in case there is stimulus, and you are going to make that recall super worthwhile for your dog. And it will come over time. I have, when I had the dog that would redirect and injure the other dogs, we had neighbors on one side that also had a dog, and he loved to fence fight that dog. So what we ended up doing in that scenario was building a dog run that did not touch that part of the fence and prevented the dog from actually accessing that part of the fence unless I was using the yard with him or I was supervising him and I could interrupt the behavior. So he could not just go outside and have these moments of aggression at the fence where he would then redirect onto my other dogs. That was a great option. I loved it. It was a little pricey because we had to put a dog run in, but I would say worth it if you can do it. Otherwise, I would use the long line. I would go outside with your dog, which is a pain in the butt, but super effective because we want to be there to interrupt that behavior. Those of you guys with chain link fences, those are like a nemesis in the dog training world because your dog can see everything, but they can't access it. They're usually on a green space, usually where people walk, usually with dogs, sometimes a dog park even behind those fences. Rough times. So Solutions. A good hedge can be your friend. It looks pretty too. So that's a good option for lots of people. It takes some time to grow though. Adding a dog run in, so you have a dog run and then you have your exterior fence. That's my preference. If you can do that and a hedge, great. Some people are allowed to build wood fences on the inside of the chain link. That's a good option too, also pricey. The cheapest option for adding a visual blockade to those fences is privacy stripping. There's strips that interweave in the chain link. They create a bit of a visual barrier. They're not perfect, but if you're looking for like, I need something really quick right now to help make this better, and I'm going to do XYZ training, or I'm also going to eventually build a dog run or plant a hedge, or maybe I'm doing those too, but I need something right now, those privacy strips help quite a bit. Most of the cases that aren't severe barrier reactivity does help. Like, I see a big difference in those dogs. So that can be a good option, like right off the hop. Again, in a perfect world, when you're buying your house, you're thinking, hey, what kind of foot traffic goes by? And I have a dog, or I have multiple dogs. Something to consider, because it can really make your life hell if you buy a house with a backyard that backs onto a dog park and you have a dog that's barrier reactive. And I would definitely put a dog run in that scenario. So things to think about when you're setting up your lifestyle. Some of your lifestyle does have to be built around your dogs. And your dogs can also be trained to have better behavior within that lifestyle. So it's kind of a give and take. We want all the things to work perfectly. If you guys have questions, you want to chat about this topic more, that's great. Just chime in. Have a great day.